If you hear mysterious noises and sounds, if you hear your name called when there's no one around, keep going, dear listener. This story is for you. I hope it will accomplish what I wrote it to do. In these words, you will find all the tools you'll need so that when you're faced with unimaginable things, you won't react with fear, as most people do. You'll be equipped, calm, and able to see the truth. My best, Hedy. This is What We Keep Hidden. By Lauren Nicole. Chapter 8. Compost. The next day, Lucy and I headed out towards Betty's house. A heavy morning fog was lifting in preparation for the midday sun. The air still had a chill in it, so I buttoned my raincoat almost up to the neck and pulled my hood over my head. I clipped Lucy's leash to my belt loop and to her vest, then double-checked my pocket for the whistle, and we were off. The purple rope was even more vivid than when we wove it through the shrubs the day before. I kept a finger on the rope as we followed the twisting neon purple vine through the shady grove. If it wasn't for the rope and the roofline, I still wouldn't be able to tell when to turn to get to Betty's house. The shrubs all looked the same from our side of the grove. As we got closer, Lucy's ears perked up. I thought it was because we were near the house, but then I heard it too. The sound was faint at first, then loud enough to make out two voices. They were both low and speaking softly, so softly that I couldn't make out exactly what they were saying. It sounded as urgent as it was incessant, but neither of them sounded like Betty's voice. Making our way through the bushes, I prepared myself for how I would introduce myself and Lucy to these people who would surely be surprised at our emergence from the grove. My eyes adjusted to the bright light outside of the shade of the tree canopy, but I was shocked to find no one there. Even Lucy looked up at me, confused at not finding anyone on the other side. I looked around, but found no footprints, no signs of anyone walking away, nothing but a sharp, rhythmic squeaking coming from a distance. Up closer to the house, a squeaky wheelbarrow came into view, with Betty right behind it.
Well, hello there,
she called to us.
Hi,
I called back. I unclipped the leash from my belt loop and tucked it into a pocket on Lucy's vest. Humphrey, hearing the commotion, jumped up on the porch railing to see what was happening. As soon as Lucy spotted him, her tail wagged furiously. Go on then, go say hi, I told her as I gave her a pat on the back and walked over to meet Betty. Perfect timing, you two, Betty said as she took her hat off and wiped the sweat from her brow. I just brought this load back from the compost heap out back. Hope you like getting your hands dirty. I don't mind at all, although I do prefer mud, I told her matter-of-factly. There'll be plenty of time for that later. Here, you'll need these. Betty took a wadded-up piece of canvas and handed it to me. Put those on and come sit here, right next to me. I unfolded the fabric and found that it was kind of a half apron with many pockets. In one of the pockets was a folded-up hat with a wide brim, and in the other was a spade and trowel. You're going to want to put that on, Betty mentioned as she pointed to the hat. Don't want you getting sunburned. I nodded and put the hat over my hood and tied the apron around my waist. Perfect. Now you look like an old pro. Sit, 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 sit. She gestured to the ground next to her. So, what are we doing? I asked as I sat down. Today is composting day, she said. Take some from the wheelbarrow here and make sure to pat it down at the base of the plants. I took some from the wheelbarrow in my hands. It was warm and a little squishy. My face must have shown how grossed out I was because Betty started laughing. The chemical reactions create the heat. That's what happens when the organic materials break down. Oh. I took the handful and brought it to the base of the plants, carefully packing it in. Like this? I asked. Looks good to me. See, I knew you'd be a natural. I smiled as I grabbed another handful from the wheelbarrow. Now, Betty said, tell me about these inventions of yours. Oh, like my radio? Well, it detects microwaves instead of radio waves, I explained, gently patting the scoop between the tidy stalks sprouting from the dry and dusty soil. Like the microwave I have in my kitchen? What made you want to listen to those? Well, everyone already listens to radio waves. There's no novelty there. Microwaves, on the other hand, no one really knows what those sound like. I see. Betty clasped her hands together. How marvelous. So, what do these microwaves sound like? They're very squeaky when they do come through. At first, I had to test it by chasing after Mr. Dad when he would heat up his coffee, and whew, they were loud. It blasted our eardrums. Betty let out a chortle. I'm sure that will come up more than the coffee. I guess. I smiled sheepishly. I'm not allowed to bring my radio into the kitchen anymore. Betty laughed. We continued our work, spreading the compost throughout the rows of the various plants in Betty's garden. Sometimes we would talk, and other times we would sit and work in silence, but it was never uncomfortable or awkward. Finally, I mustered enough courage to ask what I had been wanting to. Betty, who else lives here? What do you mean? Betty looked at me suspiciously, like I'd mentioned something confidential, something I wasn't supposed to know about. The last few times I've been here, I saw someone upstairs, and earlier I heard people talking. I figured they were... Nonsense! Betty snapped. No one lives here, but me. Oh, I muttered softly. My confusion began to work its way up to my eyebrows again, to settle into those 2 little wrinkles creased between them. It was my confusion's favorite spot to settle in and contemplate all the predicaments that came up. But I distinctly remember seeing someone in the window that first night. When I was leaving, I insisted. No, you were mistaken, Betty screeched as she threw her arms down at her sides. She dropped the spade in her hand and got to her feet. Kids and their imaginations, she muttered to herself. Always imagining, making trouble, seeing things that aren't there. Betty made her way back to the house and climbed the porch steps, still muttering. Reaching the front door, she turned on her heels and called back to me. That's enough for today. It's best you take Lucy home. Now. With that, she swiveled around, disappeared into the house, and slammed the front door. In hindsight, Betty's extreme reaction to such a benign question should have been my first clue that not everything in this house was exactly as it seemed. Thank you for joining us on this episode of What We Keep Hidden. Tune in next time to see what happens. What We Keep Hidden is written, narrated, and produced by Lauren Nicole. This has been a Lauren Nicole creation.